welcome to another episode of State of the Franchise. I am Tom Stadler here with my glorious co-host, Fred Dakin.
It's good to be here. I love being here. It's my favorite place.
It's great, Fred. I'm glad we're back. We're glad we're doing this again. We got a whole new setup here. Mm-hmm. We're feeling very official all of a sudden.
We're in the stewed.
The stewed. Yeah, we have migrated from the living room, which we did for our last couple of recordings, into the studio now, which is also my office. But it's very official. I don't know. I like the ambiance. I got a rock photo.
And it's signed.
It's signed. 1999. Yep.
Did you buy it signed or did you go somewhere and get it signed?
Oh, no. Oh, no. This was after a WrestleMania event in 1999. I had a opportunity to go to, there's this old place called Dave Hero's Sports Page that was on First Street or Water Street. It might have been even a little bit off Water, but he had The Rock coming there after this, pay-per-view event to sign autographs. So we went there, we stood in line, there were about 100 people there. And so we went in there, my dad and I got in, and yeah, so we got to meet The Rock. He signed the photograph for me. They were just handing him out these photographs. And I was like, this is not the most photogenic. It's just he looks real angry, he's just, I don't know.
It's pretty cool though. I was taken out of middle school once to go meet Hillary Duff at a mall.
What?
Because I had a huge crush on Lizzie McGuire.
Oh man, me too. That's amazing. What middle school were you at?
This was in Georgia. Yeah, I was living in Georgia, in Conyers, Georgia, and we got to the mall, and it was just wrapped around the whole place. And at one point, my babysitter who took me out of school was just like, it's going to be a couple hours, and they're saying we might not even get to see her. Oh. And I said the creepiest thing you could ever say. I said, as long as I can see her in person, I don't have to get an autograph. So we went to the Belk because she was set up in front of a Belk, but they had the big metal doors closed. Mm-hmm. And so we went around the other side, and I could just I had my fingers on the metal, just looking so I could see her face, just like a little creep.
That's actually funny. That's honestly the feeling I get when I went to Comic-Con. You are you're in the same room as all these celebrities, but you're not going up and shaking their hand. You're not having one-on-one conversations. You're just listening to them talk at you, and it's almost kind of like going to a conference, like any other conference, where it's here's your special speaker for the evening. And it's well, that's cool, but instead of having Professor Johnson from Harvard, you have Mark Hamill. So it's you have that kind of fun piece. Anyway, again, this is a podcast, State of the Franchise, where every week we are talking about a different franchise in the loosest sense of the term, and very excited this week, Fred, because this is kind of our more establishing episode here. Just you and me on this one, talking about Edgar Wright's Three Flavours Cornetto Trilogy. I think previously I had said it was the Cornetto Trilogy, but Wikipedia corrected me.
Yeah, I've never heard the flavors thing, but I like it a lot. I really wanted to bring some we don't have cornettos here, but I wanted to bring drumsticks, which I feel is the equivalent. But I had a tummy ache, so you had to suffer too. I was like, I'm not going to buy them, and I'm not going to get any.
It's a bummer.
They're tasty.
So, okay, so that is because when I was watching the movies, I'm like, okay, so that's a cornetto. And it did look like a drumstick, and I just figured they had to be around here, but so that's just the English brand.
Yeah, I assume it's something like Mars brand or something. I don't know if it's Mars, but it's probably English, and they just don't distribute it here.
Okay. Interesting, though. I guess that's because I tried looking it up, and I'm they just showed me pictures of it, and they're here, it's a ice cream cone. I'm yeah, great. But it's such a derivative piece. I think that's why I love that's what it's called, because you're not having anything to do with ice cream in either of these, other than they are just a snack at some point. But as I said, I just rewatched all of these movies in the past week, and I love them all. The one that I'll get into this later, but I was a little skeptical on revisiting The World's End, and I was surprised that I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's my least favorite, but they're all good, is my thing.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. They're all good, but that's probably the least favorite of them all. Even though I'd still enjoyed watching it.
For those who are less familiar with the Cornetto Trilogy, The trilogy consists of 3 films, one being the 2004 horror comedy Shaun of the Dead, which follows Shaun and his best friend as they maneuver the zombie apocalypse.
Followed then in 2007 by the action comedy Hot Fuzz, which tells the story of Sergeant Nicholas Angel, who goes to a small village in the English countryside and navigates his way into a mysterious case involving a secret society that is kind of pulling the strings in the town. And that was finished up by
the final film in the Cornetto trilogy, The World's End, which follows a group of friends as they return to their hometown to do a pub crawl, but things are not as they should be.
No, they are not. A fun sci-fi adventure there. So all 3 films give us a different flavor, as we talked about the 3 flavors of the Cornetto trilogy. Was Shaun of the Dead your first exposure to Edgar Wright? What's your personal history with him?
Yeah, I remember the ads for this movie, and to me it kind of looked dumb because when I was younger, the whole idea of comedy horror, I just couldn't really connect with it. The whole idea of having wildly different tones and managing it in a film, like I remember when I first saw American Werewolf in London, a movie that is huge for Edgar Wright, like that's like his favorite movie.
Yeah,
that inspires him a lot.
Right.
I didn't like it. I was like, this is stupid. Like, it's like they're making jokes, but now that's like one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And like, I love movies that kind of go wild with tone. And I just remember watching Shaun of the Dead also hit because I had just come across The British Office.
Oh.
And it had so I was kind of getting like a lesson in English humor because that's the thing that stands out when I watch Shaun of the Dead is not really the horror. It's that very quippy English dialogue as well as the kinetic energy of the movie, those quick cuts.
Right.
So I remember we just rented it at a friend's house, and from there I was all about it. And what about you? How were you introduced?
No, and I mean, I was about the same thing. And I guess I was even going to ask you too, because I feel like my introduction to horror comedy was like Scary Movie. Here's a kind of a spoof, or it's playing off the themes, which it's very meta in itself because obviously Scream itself was a entire commentary about horror, but not in the comedy sense, just sort of in you love it even though we're telling you how it works. It's like you're seeing how the pasta's made and you're still like, I want that pasta. Right. And that's, I felt like, Scary Movie was another level deep. So then when Shaun of the Dead came along, I'm like, oh, this would be great. And I think back then I was still a little new to British comedy. And so when I watched it, I'm like, I don't know that resonated with me. I feel like the jokes kind of went over my head, but I liked it because it's a zombie movie. And it really took me a few years to feel like, oh, actually, that's great. Like every time you revisit it, it feels better. But that was easily my first exposure to Edgar Wright, was watching that.
Mm-hmm. And I think what was different was Scary Movie was a big movie that I did eventually see, but it was one that I wanted to see, was too young to see. I think what makes them different is the Scary Movie movies, they play the horror for comedy. And what was different about Shaun of the Dead and American Werewolf in London, and kind of I know how he approached the script is treat the horror like horror, then make the characters funny.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what was throwing me for a loop when I was younger, was being genuinely freaked out, but also laughing. And then it clicked into place when I saw Shaun of the Dead because the humor was hitting for me. The horror is pretty good in it. It's suspenseful. The character deaths are impactful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally am right there with you. Where I feel like you do rewatch it and you're almost kind of gutted when somebody does go. Even Bill Nye's character, I'm like, damn. It's like they had this moment where they reconnected. Mm-hmm. And I remember just as a teenager being like, I don't care about this. Why who cares about this dad and sort of stepdad and son? And it's sort of oh, there's a lot of meaning to this. And I think that's one thing I love that Edgar Wright does is he really balances heart with just straight jokes.
Well, his friendship stuff is always on point. Just male friendship is always a thing. It's funny you bring up Bill Nye. When I always think about Bill Nye in Shaun of the Dead, I don't know if that's the movie he established in, but like of that time period from now till back then, there's a Bill Nye move in every movie that he's in, and it's a ramp up to disclosing information. He goes, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but blah, 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 blah. Like,
that's true.
And that's his move in that. I don't know if you've ever seen About Time.
Yes.
And he does a lot of like scenes like, I don't know if I ever told you this, but you children mean the world to me. And like that's the Bill Nye move, is like the big ramp up and then the like dropping of the emotional bomb. And he does it in Shaun of the Dead.
That's true though. Sean, I don't know if I ever told you. No, they did.
Even now, Love Actually, he does it with his the guy who's like his manager.
His producer,
Yeah, he has the same. That was probably the first time he dropped the Bill Nye like truth bomb.
You're the love of my fucking life. It's he is on a run. That's something I want to revisit too as we keep talking, but the context of where these actors all were at this point in their career at that time versus where they are now, because it's just like you casually have a lot of actors that were just sort of like dropped in there. And Martin Freeman, obviously, like totally different space in 2004, 2007, to where he is now, where it's like if he pops up in something, that's like he's like your leading man. Like he's not your throwaway side character who's hanging out with.
I remember when he was like cast in the Hobbit movies, that was like, oh, that's one for us. Like, like they went with someone that I like, but now it's like, oh, he's in, Marvel movies. He's,
Yeah, Black Panther. That's right. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I think it's so interesting there. And I mean, that was, obviously Hot Fuzz, I think, was where it all elevated to me. That's when I was like, okay, Edgar Wright. I mean, obviously Simon Pegg, you love him, but like Edgar Wright, it's like there's something to his style, the way he's doing a movie. And I was like, this is great. And then I think it all clicked for me. And I'm curious where you kind of hit this point, if it was Shaun of the Dead or not, when I saw Scott Pilgrim. And I was like, this guy is like the voice of like my generation. Like he gets the way I watch a movie. Like,
yeah, I actually, you're not gonna believe me when I say this, but I didn't even know he directed Scott Pilgrim when Scott Pilgrim came out, which is crazy coming from me because I'm the guy where I'm like, when a movie comes out, I'm like, that guy directed,
yeah.
But I wasn't that guy then, and so when Scott Pilgrim came out, initially I was like, this isn't for me. This looks like, because Michael Cera was pretty rote at that moment.
Yeah.
But then when I watched it, I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. All the actors who I might have issues with, because this is like, Chris Evans is also an actor at the time I didn't have much love for, but when I watched it, I was like, oh, this guy's great. He knows how to use his star power.
I mean, we almost have to talk about that, because I think there's going to be some of that hot fuzz of like, I can't believe this person was in this movie in a bit part. And it almost feels like Edgar Wright has consistently, time and again, found people, cast them in a movie, and then it's just like, even like the small characters go into like a whole new stratosphere, like 5-10 years later, where you're like, that person was just like 10 minutes of screen time in this, 5 minutes. Like, how is that possible? And because that whole cast of Scott Pilgrim is off the chain.
A big one for me now is Kieran Culkin's in it. And he's like this schwarmy, assholey character.
Yeah.
Whoever made Succession just watched Scott Pilgrim and was like, all right, I want you to come do that, because he is the same. He's probably darker in Succession, but it's same assholey, like, little Gollum sitting on the edge of the couch like, I feel like this way.
Yeah. But he's so much more self-assured in Scott Pilgrim versus Succession, where he is just like, he is like that worm, like brother. Yeah, and I think it's just, I don't know. Even after Scott Pilgrim, I'm like, when is Kieran Culkin showing up? Like, I can watch the hell out of this guy. Like, it's like Macaulay's not going to do movies. We need one Culkin to represent.
Although Macaulay on American Horror Story, I think American Horror Story is not that good anymore, but he's good on it. He's the only reason I'm still watching it.
He's in the new season?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. I didn't know that. Interesting. I gave up on, I think, after season 3. But yeah, I have my own opinions on what's the guy who made
Ryan Murphy.
We could have a long talk about that. I want to talk about some other auteurs, though, some other directors, because I think Edgar Wright, absolutely for me, is one of my favorite all-time directors, and it's wonderful to talk about a lot of his works. I think 3 of his best, and we'll see after this year, where he's going to sit, but in terms of his top pictures. But yeah, where does Edgar Wright sit, I feel like, on your director totem pole, and who else would you say are like among your favorite directors?
Well, for him specifically, I think because he works relatively sparsely, I feel I've kind of have a expectation of excitement for when one of his movies comes out. Like Last Night for Soho, I'm excited for it, and I'm going to go see it as soon as I can. But because he has these nice like breaks where he takes his time with films, like I feel like I'm not jumping at information like I would with like if QT like announces Quentin Tarantino. If he announces like this is my new movie, this is what it's about, I kind of want to know everything about it.
Yeah.
With Edgar Wright, he is probably in my top 10 of favorite filmmakers, but I'm always like, all right, I know he's gonna do something good, so it's like I'm like here for it. And I had for like some of my, and I was trying to think of people who like, I know filmmaker is a broad term, but the people who not necessarily wrote the scripts too and also directed, but just kind of seem like they have more of a hand in their films than just directing.
Yes.
Like, this is such a cop-out, but I mean, like, Martin Scorsese is like, he's probably my guy, but I hate admitting that he's my guy.
I don't think there's anything wrong, though, with saying that Scorsese is a talented director. Like, we wouldn't have Quentin Tarantino, we wouldn't have Edgar Wright, we wouldn't have half of the directors we have today without Scorsese, right? Like, he kind of broke the mold of even what, some of the USC film brats were doing. It's like, he's like, no, you guys can go make your Close Encounters. I'm going to make Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, and we're going to just change the game here a little bit. So,
and what's the common denominator of all these people is they're a bunch of fucking movie nerds.
Yeah.
And I think that really comes into play that what makes a good filmmaker is you can just have this catalog style knowledge of film, and you can be like, Quentin Tarantino is the big example for this. Like, I'm gonna do a shot from El Bravo from this, and it's gonna be this canted angle from this Japanese like thing. I think these are guys who have encyclopedic knowledge of film and can execute it.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think there was an interesting thing too, even on the Peacock app, where they were like, Edgar Wright catered this list. And I remember, I think I was looking at something on HBO where they were like, oh, these are all of Idris Elba's favorite movies. And it was like a very like clean-cut list of like, here's the Suicide Squad. Because it's like, obviously he's going to pick his own stuff. And it's like, it was like Dirty Harry. And I'm like, he did not pick this. Whereas you looked at this list on Peacock, and at first I'm like, okay, Night of the Living Dead, sure. But then you see American Werewolf in London, and then you see like 5 deep cuts, and I'm like, okay, he definitely picked this list.
The one that surprised me was Dead Ringers on there, which is a movie I've never seen. I'm gonna watch because I love Jeremy Irons, and that's a Cronenberg, right?
Oh, I think so.
And it's funny you brought that up. Last night we threw on like Bride of Frankenstein, The Shrinking Man. That Shrinking Man, that's a wild movie. I don't know if you saw that. It's just pretty much them playing with forced perspective. But there is like a moment at the end with a giant tarantula, and I'm pretty easy when it comes to big spiders in movies. I will be freaked out.
Yeah, he picked a good one. I know there was a lot that I wanted to check out. I'm probably not going to get around to, but that's all right. And it's like, you can tell that a guy like Edgar Wright, like especially when you look at a list like that he has appreciation for all these people, but ultimately he's going to pull from the things that you see references in his movie. It's like, yeah, The Shrinking Man. Like you probably has a lot that he wanted to put in Ant-Man that.
Oh yeah, I didn't even make that connection, but I bet that was like a thing he was looking back on is like, I'm going to use these forced perspective techniques, or I'm going to do a homage to this.
Yeah. In terms of trilogies, though, I think it's interesting to bring up these Three Flavours Cornetto Trilogy because it's not a traditional trilogy at all. It's the loose sense trilogy that you were talking about earlier with Thomasine McKenzie of like, oh, here are 3 movies where she's like kind of debuting on the scene. And it's like, that's kind of what this trilogy is. It's same actors, but everything else is just, there's loose connections between that. And I don't know.
It's kind of like a troupe style, where it's like a traveling group of actors and a like director putting on a show, and then very Christopher Guest is kind of it's like if Christopher Guest had Easter eggs for his own movies, like in his movies. Because one thing I love about Edgar Wright is I love like people who are self-referential in their movies in a way that doesn't annoy me. Like Kevin Smith is a person who, like, half the time I'm fine with it, the other half I'm like, oh, okay,
it's
okay,
like,
buddy.
We get it, man. You're referencing Chasing Amy for like the 100th time. Like, we get it. Like,
but when Edgar Wright does it, like a big one for me is when they're running through one of the bars in World's End, the game machine that Nick Frost's character always plays in Shaun of the Dead, that like makes the noise and alerts the zombies.
Oh,
that's in the background, and it makes like the same little jingle. Like,
I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, like he's doing Easter eggs and stuff, and it feels like it's, who is this for? Because it's not for the average movie theater. No, it's for more movie nerds like us.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what it is. He's putting that stuff out there because he knows he has fans. I've got some budget numbers here too about how he basically relied on people to come and see his movies because the budgets were astronomically low. It's unbelievable, actually. So I just did some brief history just to kind of give some context on, how even Edgar Wright, because I think it really helps build how this whole Cornetto trilogy came together. He was born in Poole back in 1974.
Both his parents were artists and teachers, and I know like they would quit work and like we're gonna be artists, but then they eventually had to go back to work. So he had that in his family, starving artists, people who are creatives.
Which is like, I feel like you need that kind of energy in order to fuel you from a young age, which he did. He started making movies at age 14. Where, using a gifted Super 8 camera, and then he won his next camera on a contest, which blew me away because I'm like, what is this show? I would have loved to have won a camera on a TV show contest.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I think it's a big thing because it's like they let him go then to an art school at Poole. It was called Poole College of Art Design. Now it's Arts University Bournemouth. And that's where he started making his short films, which is like mid 90s. It just seems it's right, but it's just in your brain. You're like, he can't be that old.
Yeah, he seems young, but he's older than he looks.
Because how old's Taika? He's got to be probably around the same age, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know. I just associate them because they seem just so tight together now. It's like them and like James Gunn. They all just are like, you're like, what's up, bro?
For sure.
But yeah, so it's interesting though because he basically got into his first TV show, which was a show called Silent, which is actually where we met Simon Pegg and Jessica Stevenson back in 1996, and then it was in '98 that Simon Pegg and Jessica Stevenson started developing Spaced and wanted Edgar Wright to direct the series. And I mean, that's really where the whole kind of like journey to what we even have now begins. Like, are you familiar with Spaced?
Spaced is like one of my favorite TV shows.
Really?
When I wrote like a 6-episode TV show when I was in college, and it's very much in the theme of Spaced, where each episode I want it to be like homage-y but not parody of films, and that's what it does so great. And he continues to do in his movies, but that show is really just hitting on like movie scenes, like nerd culture in such a great way.
Well, it really gives you a nice taste of what we ended up seeing in this trilogy. That's really what the point I wanted to get to here is just that like you don't have these movies without Spaced, and it just seems like such a happy accident that they are like, okay, we met here, because I mean, you can credit Simon Pegg for what you want. He was the co-writer in all these movies. Like, the dude has some talent. I mean, even watching Star Trek Beyond, I was like, oh, is he that good? And it's like, Yes.
And he writes on those too, I think. Like Star Trek Beyond, especially, I think he's like the co-writer for.
Yeah, he kind of had to take the helm because I think JJ just dropped out because he wanted to go do Star Wars. And he's like, well, what about this? Like, we had a good thing going here, JJ. God, I got a whole hot takes on Abrams. I'm just...
More like cold takes.
Oh, ooh. Yeah, there are some cold takes. Yeah, so I think that's really, though, it's a breaking point for Edgar Wright because he gets into this show. They get some success. It's a cult hit now,
And it's all there in the show. Like anything you see in the Cornetto is already in the show.
Yeah.
The dialogue, the kinetic filming energy, the quick cuts, all that stuff is like there.
Mm-hmm. Nick Frost comes in the scene, and then you have the whole thing.
Nick Frost has real Proud Boy energy in space.
He does.
He does.
He's like, it actually kind of threw me off guard the first time I watched it, and he's just this like very militant neighbor, and because I feel like I've known guys like that in my life, but like, I don't know. Now you're almost like, I wish I didn't know guys like that.
I love Peter Serafinowicz.
Serafinowicz.
I might have added a little extra in there, but I love him, and he pops up a lot. One of the OG paintball episodes before Community, they had a paintball episode.
Oh my god, that is, man. I feel like it all feeds into one thing or another, right? Like, how many people did they inspire by doing that kind of like, the Community does feel like in the very same spirit as Spaced, like the American version, just totally different setting and all of that. But yeah, then you look at, basically then the next movie project, the big movie project they get, Shaun of the Dead. That leads then into Hot Fuzz, and then ultimately to The World's End. With in between there, you've got, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which all of these are written and directed by Edgar Wright. It looks like I was trying to look at his filmography from that point forward. The only movies that he didn't have a directing credit on was Adventures of Tintin and Ant-Man, which he should have had a directing credit on. We'll talk about that in What Could Have Been. And then he did the Sparks Brothers movie recently that
that's the newer documentary.
Wrote but didn't direct.
It's a documentary about a band called the Spark Brothers.
Okay, are they real or is this...
It's a real band.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like one of those like documentaries about a band where no one knows the band, and then when you watch the documentary, you're probably like, "Oh, these songs are good."
Yeah.
Just based off what I've heard. I know with Tintin, he was brought in by Spielberg to write and help out on it, but he was either working on Hot Fuzz or World's End, one of those films. It could have been Scott Pilgrim. I think it was Scott Pilgrim. So he actually had Joe Cornish, who, I don't know if you know Joe Cornish, did Attack the Block, the King Arthur movie recently.
Yeah, Kid Who Would Be King.
He had him work with him, and that's kind of where Joe Cornish got his start. Although he hasn't gotten to make nearly enough films. I think Joe Cornish is amazing. He's been in talk for like Bond and stuff, and I'm there for that.
Do it. I mean, honestly, like you watch Attack the Block, and that's such a fun movie. I actually did watch The Kid Who Would Be King too, and I enjoyed it.
It was fine. Like there was nothing wrong with what he did for that movie.
Yeah, but it did miss a mass appeal. I feel like, and if it didn't have his name attached to it, I don't know that I would have seeked it out. But
I loved the Merlin in it. I have a big thing for who's that actress who's the villain in it, and she was in Dr. Sleep. Rebecca Ferguson,
and she's in Dune. Yeah, Rebecca Ferguson.
Oh yeah, Rebecca Ferguson.
She's great in Dune. This is also a reminder to folks that if you've not watched Dune yet, I recommend it. It's very enjoyable. I haven't watched Dune.
I'm going Sunday because I know me. I can't watch it at home. I'm too on my phone and in my own head.
Yeah.
So we're gonna try to go see it at the Majestic.
Okay.
Because they have it's not called an IMAX, but it's a IMAX size screen.
Right, like also screen. Mm-hmm.
We're gonna try to find a showing that doesn't have a lot of people and just check it out there. Yeah. Because I need it big.
Yeah.
I need it big.
It's good.
I'm very excited.
I wish I would have saved it for a theater again. I feel like I said the same thing with the Suicide Squad, but
well, how did you? I know we're jumping around, but I don't think we have to talk about this long. How did you feel about Baby Driver?
I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it while I was watching it.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a movie I don't think about. And also, like, it's got a little bit of a blot on it for me because of, like, that was right when all the Kevin Spacey stuff came out.
Yeah.
And He's got lines in that movie that's like, and nobody likes taking candy from a baby. And I'm just like, ugh.
It's going to be very hard, especially with a movie like Baby Driver, to separate the art from the artist, and not Edgar Wright. And it's not his fault. I think he was like, here, I have a chance to get Kevin Spacey for this movie. I'm not going to say no. But then again, it's like, if you had any idea, maybe you could have gone with like
anybody.
Yeah, like
Lance Hendrickson.
Just every movie that Kevin Spacey was in digitally put in Christopher Plummer now.
I like all, yeah.
Like, what was that one? All the Money in the World or whatever? That'd be great. I think I like Baby Driver. Of all the movies so far, I think it's probably lower on the list for me. I love the style because it's very him. The music, I think it was also very timely then too, because it was right at the same time that another Guardians movie came out, and everyone's like, these guys are very similar in the way that they love to like do record, needle drops and, push like a lot of action forward. They're very quippy, but like, I don't know. There's something I think about what Guardians did with the ensemble versus Baby Driver that I was like, I think Guardians did it a little better.
I'll leave it with, I think it's really cool John Hamm role in Baby Driver, because he's like a maniac and pretty great.
Another underrated John Hamm role. He keeps reoccurring on Curb, and it's
he's good in Curb. I'm very excited to watch. I was gonna watch it last night, the new episode, then I saw it was 40 minutes long, and it was like 12:30 at night, and I was like, man. No, save it.
The best thing, and I couldn't geek out on this too much while I was watching it, but it's a big Albert Brooks episode, and I like, because I was watching it with my girlfriend, and I'm just like, that's Albert Brooks. All I could think of every time he talked was that episode of The Simpsons where they like go to the other town. He's like the Bond villain. He's like, you want these moccasins? Neither do I. Get out of here. Yeah, I think, overall though, his career's it's really been hit after hit. Like, has he had a bomb yet? I don't think he's had, anything that would be even a critical bomb. Like,
yeah, well, I'm surprised that they make money, because I know my movie nerd friends like the Cornetto Trilogy, and some people I talk to like know these movies.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that he's consistently, and maybe it's because he does like not a huge budget movie except for Scott Pilgrim, maybe Baby Driver, that he's able to kind of do what he wants. It's surprising that he comes out with a movie every couple of years and it's like his movie.
Yeah. I think the Blank Check podcast actually talked about this recently, that it's like, if you're under a certain budget, you get full creative control. But once you start asking for money, that's when the studio gets to step in and start making the movie they want to make. Because one of the things about Shaun of the Dead was the budget was $6 million. Like, that's nothing. Especially even for 2004. Like, I can't think of many movies that you can make for $6 million or less. In total, though, the whole Cornetto trilogy, and I would assume the last movie, At the World's End, had the most money. $38 million. That's nothing.
That's like a quarter of a Dune or something.
It is. Like, you think how much these blockbusters, they're $100 million movies. He's making it here for pennies on the dollar. No wonder studios love working with him.
And they don't look shitty.
No, they look great. They look like they're high budget movies, or at least like moderately budgeted. But he just maximizes where it goes, probably because he uses the same cast in every one. It seems like he and Peg would be the guys who would defer their salary and be like, we want to make the movie we want. We're going to get Dalton. We're going to get, Bill Nye even for just 10 minutes and make our movie. Because, they ended up grossing then, this is not astronomical, but when you consider the budget, $156 million.
It's like tripling your budget.
Yeah. It's five times what you invested in the movies. Jeez. And he's a money machine in that regard, because they're not making a ton of money, but they're not costing you anything, and they're critical darlings, like every single one of them.
I'd be curious to know what the budget is for Last Night in Soho. I don't know if that's reported this early or not.
I bet you it could find it.
Yeah, I want to know. I want to know what the budget is.
Oh, they might not have it yet.
I don't think they report it till later.
Because it might not officially be done, even though the movie's in the can. Yeah. Nothing reported. Oh, no. Baby Driver was $34 million.
$34 million. That's not bad.
That made $277 million. The guy just makes money.
I would just want to know how much he paid Jamie Foxx, though.
Oh.
That had to have been like at least $5 million.
But he does that in every movie, right? The other thing, I wanted to mention about the Cornetto trilogy is, speaking about cast, there's 7 cast members in each of the 3 movies. Same actors. 2 of which, I'll give you the easy ones, are Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. Who are the other 5? 2 are very notable names. 3 are going to be tough, but you might be able to pick up their roles. So,
well, the 2 are Bill Nighy and Martin Freeman?
Yes.
Those are the 2 big ones.
Those are the big ones.
Okay.
Yep. Now,
so this is where it gets hard. I have a guess, but I can't picture him in World's End. Is Rafe Spall? Is he only in 2 of them?
Rafe Spall is... That's one of the Andes. And
he's one of the Andes, and he's the You Got Red on You.
Oh, that's that guy?
Yeah, and he's Timothy Spall's son, right?
No, I didn't know that.
What's his name from Harry Potter?
Yeah. I was trying to picture him, too, because... A, I was getting stuck on who is he in Shaun of the Dead after I read this fact. And then B, I was like, who is this guy like in real life? Because he looks like somebody else. Mm-hmm. So that totally makes sense.
And then is the other Andy in all 3? Because I know he's in World's End.
No, it's not him.
Okay. I'm gonna... So, okay, now I don't know her name, but I keep thinking of people who are in 2 of them because... The first zombie that they throw the records at, I know is in the AA circle in the World's End. I don't know if she's in Hot Fuzz.
She's not.
She's not in Hot Fuzz.
No.
Is it any more senior citizens?
Yes.
Oh, God. Yeah, I can't even think of 3. Yeah, I can't think of 3.
Okay. So... You had it right with Martin Freeman is one. Bill Nighy is the other. Rafe Spall. Her name is Julia Deakin. She was the landlord on Spaced.
Oh yeah, her.
She is the bread and breakfast landlady in World's End. She is Yvonne's mother, the one that's walking with the little girl from Spaced in Shaun of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it's Mary Porter in Hot Fuzz. I'm pretty sure that is the shop owner. Or
yeah,
not?
She's one of the people in the town, right?
Yeah, I think she either is the one that's in the tavern or the one that runs like the...
Is she the one that's doing the crossword?
Maybe.
Ooh.
Now I might have to look up who Mary Porter is. Because now I'm like, is she the one that's like, no luck finding them swans then? Mm-hmm. That's the one swan, actually. Yeah, okay. And then the second one is Patricia Franklin. And this one I struggled with. And I'm just checking this out, too. Oh, she is the No Luck Finding Them Swans.
Okay.
Yeah. So she was in all 3 as well. One, she's a spinster in Shaun of the Dead. And an upstairs beehive lady. Man, okay, that's...
So these are small. Okay, I don't feel as bad. I was getting like...
You got
Rafe
the 3
Spall
big
is
ones.
the good pull, I think.
Mm-hmm. I mean, let's get into the highlights. I think that's the perfect time to get into it. He has a great actor pull in every movie, and the one missed opportunity was not casting a Bond in Shaun of the Dead.
Right, which I wonder if he could have gotten like Lazenby or something.
At that point, you could have got Daniel Craig, right?
Yeah.
That was way before he was in Bond yet, though, so that's the other problem.
Yeah, he had the first Bond, but I still think like what we know about Daniel Craig and him being in Knives Out and all that, and maybe he's different now because after all this James Bond time, he wants to be goofier.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he likes being funny.
Yeah.
So I think if they would have given him like a good role somewhere, you know, he would have killed it.
Yeah, he's got that like Chris Hemsworth feeling to him of like, we're gonna put you in serious roles. Like, no, I'm gonna do better with comedy. Like, let's do this. Because we'll definitely get into that piece of it all, but the casting is easily one of the biggest highlights, I think, for this whole trilogy. It's just like, how on earth did he know? It's like, how did he know? I mean, he knew that these people were good, right? But it's just, I think, when we talk about Hot Fuzz, which I do want to get into that right now, is he's got Olivia Colman in a side role.
Is it the lady from The Favorite?
Yeah. She's the what is she? The Queen Elizabeth
Queen
in
Elizabeth.
The
That's what I
the
thought.
Crown. She's in, Fleabag. She's a stepmom in that. It's just like, yeah, Olivia Colman's blowing up. I was like, she's arguably the biggest actress in this movie, or the biggest actor in this movie, and she's been a bit part in that.
She's in Hot Fuzz, or yeah,
Hot Fuzz. She's one of the cop team.
Oh yeah, she's one of the cop, because she's so like, she is in that zone of when she was in the awards show and she won that award. That's like her character in Hot Fuzz.
Yes. Oh, I know. She feels like that's who she is in real life, which is funny because she's so self-deprecating.
You know who else was one short of a trilogy?
Who's that?
Filch.
Yes, he was. And Serafinowicz was also in the third one.
He was?
Yes, which I had to look up because I found it, and they're like, yeah, he plays some redheaded guy. And I'm like, what? So, but they were close, but no cigar. There's a lot of
twos, and it's killing me because those would have been the ones I'd like to show off with.
But yeah, right. But it's Hot Fuzz. I mean, you got Jim Broadbent, you've got Timothy Dalton, you have Olivia Colman, you have Martin Freeman, Bill Nye, Kate Blanchett. I mean, even if these guys
Kate
are
Blanchett's the one.
it's a bit part, right? Like,
you have to have a sense of humor to be that role because it's like, oh, we're going to have you in it and no one's going to see you. But I mean, those eyes don't lie.
No.
Those eyes do not lie.
You know who she is right away. I'm trying to find his name. I mean, it's the Hound.
He's like roided Big Billy Zane, I always think of.
Wow. What's his name, though? It's like, what's even the character's name? I can't even think of it now.
Grop. No.
That's Grop.
That's very fun.
I think his name is Rory something.
Yeah. Like Rory can...
Yeah, Rory McCann.
Yeah.
That's him. Which, it's like, even just playing a grunt, and I think especially after seeing Game of Thrones, and he can be very verbose, and like, he's like, I'm doing your fucking tasks. And like, it's just like, to hear him just being downgraded to like a one note like lunk, it's just such a good turn for him.
What was funny, because I'm pretty sure they shoot Hot Fuzz in the town that he lived in for a while.
Okay.
Because he apparently lived like in time in a small town, and he worked at a supermarket very similar to the supermarket.
Was he the cart boy?
he was a loader, and he said that he wanted to have his boss's name in it, but he couldn't because the boss's name was Stockwell.
Oh.
And he thought that was too much of a clever bit. Like, no one would believe that was real. Like,
oh, man.
You're going to have your grocery guy called Stockwell.
Yeah.
And apparently he was a Freemason, but didn't keep it on the hush. He'd be like, going to a meeting tonight. It's at the drawing room. Secret Mason meeting. And he'd be like, you're not supposed to tell me. And it's just funny that like Hot Fuzz is about secret societies in a small town.
Oh, my God. Which is like right on, like...
I just can already picture like that. I got a big night tonight.
Big night tonight.
Can't talk about it though.
Can't talk about it.
It's Masons.
It's I mean, I think it's illogical to talk about Hot Fuzz 'cause I think in my opinion, best of the three. Which one's your favorite?
It is. It's Hot Fuzz for me because also I think we may like it better because did you see it in theater?
Yes.
I don't know if you knew that you were in for like the similar style. I know the actors were in it, but I didn't know like I was going to get the exact same kind of treat.
Yeah.
And when I sat into it and realized that this is going to be the same but way different, it made it better. So I don't know if that adds to it, but it's definitely my favorite. It also, because it's a love letter to dad action movies, and that's like a big part of like me, and my growing up is watching like crappy dad action movies.
Oh yeah.
And then it's the one that I actually find eerie of the three. Like Shaun of the Dead doesn't scare me at all. The third one's, sci-fi is just cool and weird.
Yeah.
There's like kind of weird eeriness about like old people who have secret societies. It almost kind of very different but similar to Midsommar to me, where it's like this is a town or a place that's got its own vibe. These people are weird, but it seems friendly,
Yeah. That's a very interesting thing because we actually talked about that yesterday. I was talking with Jasmine, and because I was like, we watched these three. I was like, I know Hot Fuzz isn't a horror one or Halloween. She goes, there's a murder in that. She goes, there is a secret society. There are like bones and stuff. She's like, it's kind of spooky. And I'm like, I guess when you think about it, it really is sort of a weird kind of like, like a cult movie as much as it is like a buddy cop movie, right?
And it's gorier than Shaun of the Dead based on just the one Timothy Dalton death.
Oh, well, he doesn't die.
That's true.
I
didn't even think of
that. I remember I'm like, oh, nobody wants to die like that. And he's just like, oh,
just like sad dog noises.
I know. And he's like, I need ice cream. It's such a ridiculous movie, but it really just is. I think because it's just so well acted, it's like every beat pays off. Like there's like when he first gets to town, now Simon Pegg, and you have Nick Frost asking him all the questions, like, you ever jumped through the air with two guns? You ever, just fired at somebody while you're driving? You ever done this and that? And it's like by the end of the movie, all of those things happen in that last like 20-minute stretch where they're like, coming after the call, or like, we're gonna blow this whole fucking thing open, and like. It's just, it's a movie that, I mean, all of his movies are so self-aware. You can talk about The World's End, how, like, each bar is kind of like...
It's metaphoric of the situation.
Yeah, the names describe what's actually going to be happening in that scene, right?
Mm-hmm. In Shaun of the Dead, he calls the shot of the plot in the bar. Like, I forget the dialogue, but he's like, back here for shots at blank, and he goes through all the stuff, and it's the same, where it's like a kind of similar to what happens to them back here for shots at the bar. They get the shotgun at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I recommend anyone read that scene where he's like planning out their day. It's literally like all the stops.
Oh man, that is actually, it's such a trademark. I feel like even if you go beyond this trilogy, it's very apparent in this, but he always pays off like every little breadcrumb or every little like Chekhov's gun that he throws in the movie. It always comes back and pays off. It's like, that's the sign, I feel like, of a good director too, or good writers, that they are just like, here's our bit. Here's how we're going to pay this off, in act 24. Mm-hmm. Like,
it's very Zemeckis-y.
Yeah.
Because he's very much a, I'm going to set this up and then it's going to all like pay off and like pop up right when it needs to.
Exactly.
I love also, like, we talked about how like kind of how the bars in The World's End represent the scenes. I also just love how, I know for a while they were saying that Shaun of the Dead is a metaphor about being like in a serious relationship, how you have to kill off your best friend and your mom to be in a serious relationship.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. That's interesting. I never thought about it that way. That really is a whole allegory for that. I was even going to say, now that movie hits a little harder in a pandemic, or having gone through a pandemic where it's like, okay, here's what it's like to be cut off from the outside world, where you're holed up, and you do have to like pick, am I going to go help my mom? Do I have to deal with this person? I hate these friends. And it's like you start like telling people like hard truths, and it's like, are you going to put up with your friend who's like negligent about the whole manner? It really was like, you couldn't help but think about it, because like, here's a pandemic, here's how things responded, and it's like, yep, that checks out. But I think, the tension still all holds up. Even knowing, and, having watched it for like the 10th time, it's like knowing who's going to die, I'm still just like, oh man, they're going to make it this time.
Yeah, the deaths are impactful, which is like, again, what makes it different from like a scary movie is like, yeah, you sell the drama, you sell the horror, and you sell the comedy. You sell it all.
It really is. It's a masterclass. It's really like a great debut for him. Such a good table setter. I did want to talk about The World's End though too, because it's kind of a surprising highlight for me. I thought I was going to struggle with this movie because I remember seeing it in theaters as well. Post Scott Pilgrim, I was like ramped up. I'm like, Edgar Wright. Mm-hmm. And I just remember kind of being disappointed a little bit because it felt like, and one thing that did hold up that I remembered is that it starts slow, and it does start pretty slow. It kind of forced a little bit in getting everybody together, but then it really picks up in Act 2. I'm like, oh, okay. But I don't know. What were your takes on The World's End? Did you see it in theaters?
I did. I do have weird feelings about it because, like, I do think we are, like, not quite at the age to appreciate it because it is kind of, like, these are people, like, hitting 40, kind of realizing where their life is, and I feel like we're around 30 kind of realizing our lives. And I actually really liked the very, very beginning of the movie where it's like the montage-y stuff and it has like the younger versions of them because it was like, this also kind of looks like a Spaced episode.
Yeah.
And I don't really think they sold like they sold the friendship well enough because those guys all are great together. But I don't think like the friendship pathos and like story of it hit as well for me. But also I did feel like sort of attacked because I do have different groups of friends where I feel like the Simon Pegg, where I am trying to grab onto that like childhood because like I feel in my head I'm like, I don't want to have to do business, but if I'm with my friends, I want to act like I'm a teenager.
Yeah.
In some regard, like you got to be careful, but. And I guess I didn't like. It seemed like it was a really like you had to kind of get rid of all that to grow up. And I'm like, you don't have to.
I mean, I think to that point, yes, I would definitely say I was very much in that mindset the first time I saw the movie. I was like, I don't get this at all. Like, this is how I am with my friends. Why don't they like Simon Pegg?
And then, why don't they like shots?
Right. But then he's like 8 years later, and I'm like, I'm an older man now. I'm like, it's like a lot of people I'm friends with have settled down. And I think I have equal frustrations with each side of the coin where I'm like, I can't stand people who are too immature now and just want to go and like, get ripped. And I'm like, come on, how old are we? But then, the other thing too, I'm like, pub crawl looks really fun. Pub crawl with buddies looks like a good time. I'm like, we can't be that lame, in our 30s now that we can't do this anymore. I mean, again, coming out of or coming through a pandemic, it's like, well, when is that going to be appropriate and doing all that? But it also was just sort of like, come on, like, you don't have to be this kind of old curmudgeon. And I think there is some of that in that movie of like, your life's not over at 40. Like you can still have fun. You can still go and hang out with your buddies. Like you don't have to check in, every hour on the hour. It's like, live your life. So,
which I feel he strikes that better with Sean as a character because he's a character who's a slacker, but he really cares about things and people. And I think that's a really well-made, complicated version of a person who doesn't have it all together. Versus The World's End, I feel it's a little too cartoonish.
Yes.
And then they try to sell moments where, like, oh, he finished everyone's drink. He's got, like, a real problem, and it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's a movie that definitely tried to play some more serious themes, but it just didn't. I don't know. It very much clashed with his style. I thought the action though, once everything got going with the robots, like really started to hit a little bit better. Rosamund Pike all of a sudden showing up pre-Gone Girl. I'm like, holy smokes! Like it's like because you like know what she's capable of, and you're like, you could have thrown a lot of content at this woman, and she would have like just run with it.
It's relatively thankless.
It is.
For that movie, and I feel he does pretty well. Even though the female characters in the other movies don't have a lot to do, I think they're a little more rounded. Like his girlfriend is a quote-unquote nagging girlfriend, but it's not like in a disrespectful way. She's like meaningfully nagging him. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it does. I think that's maybe something that could come up here in coulda, woulda, shoulda is maybe just the treatment of, I think, some female characters that even like Hot Fuzz is kind of very understanding of. For our next segment, then, we are going to do coulda, woulda, shoulda, which is every week we talk about things that we would have loved to seen out of the franchise itself, whether it is an additional, installment, or if it is something that we wish they would have done differently with the current installments. I think we have a lot of potential here with Edgar Wright, mostly from him as a director, but also potentially some stuff we would have liked to see with the movies themselves. Where would you kick off with something that you would have loved to have seen, or one way or another?
Well, I feel I don't want to talk around it too much because I know we both have a lot to say. But for the could've, if we're looking at the past, it's got to be the Ant-Man movie.
Oh yeah.
Because the concerns with that movie was that was at the time in Marvel where they were getting their house style, like this is how it's gonna go. Feige was becoming more the guy who's like, I have a plan for this. This is what it's gonna look like. But to be honest, I feel it was early enough they could have had a wacky movie.
Yeah.
And I don't recall that Ant-Man movie that well. But I don't remember bigger world things in that movie that much. It's a pretty contained movie.
Yeah, which really is where I think I struggled, especially because Guardians came out around the same time, and Gunn got a ton of free reign. So I don't know if Edgar Wright just had too different of a look, because he does like to do a lot of like the quick cuts and a lot of like, like very kind of almost like an ADD.
Well, I do know stuff.
Oh.
I did some research.
Oh.
And he was actually on Mick Garris's podcast, which I recommend. It's called Postmortem. Do you know who Mick Garris is?
No, I do not.
He's the guy who he's directed a lot of shitty horror in the best way possible. He's made the Sleepwalkers movie, which is the cat horror movie that's written by Stephen King. It's not based off a book.
Okay.
He directed or wrote Hocus Pocus. He's the guy who sent where he said it's time for me to get my money or whatever. And he was on there and he was saying that he had a script and he was set to direct. He picked Paul Rudd, like that was his choice.
Wow.
He liked great. Paul Rudd. What happened was the studio said they want to send him a rewrite draft from like their house guy or in studio person.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could have been, I can't think of the director's name, the guy who ended up helming it.
Peyton Reed.
Peyton Reed. Maybe he wrote the script, and pretty much he told himself that Edgar Wright said he's going to look at the script, and when he looked at the script, he said, well, this is kind of not my baby anymore. And apparently it was a super amicable split. He said he wasn't really interested, and they said it was fine. So I doubt it will ever happen. Maybe now that we're getting movies like The Eternals. But I like to think that the door is still open for him to make a Marvel movie, especially if you think about Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, which it seems like would very much be his thing. Which, like, I'm glad that maybe there is a door open, though, too, depending on how his couple movies coming up here do. I mean, I feel like Last Night in Soho is going to do a lot for what opportunities come up. But, X-Men's going to presumably come over. It's like there's a lot of different characters, a lot of new characters you can tell stories about. Like him doing like, you think just Wolverine is simple, or like a Gambit movie finally, maybe with or without Channing Tatum.
I want Fukunaga to do the Gambit movie because like I want like a real Southern movie because isn't Gambit from like Louisiana or New Orleans?
Cajun,
I'd love like a real Cajun-y True Detective but funny, sort of like goofy. Yeah, I don't know. I'd love that.
That would be good. I would love to see, Edgar Wright, though, even just tackle some DC. Like, it's just sort of like the revenge trip, sort of like Gunn, right? It's like, well, if Marvel doesn't want me and they're not going to let me do my thing, I'm going to go to Warner Brothers, who's probably going to let me do my thing.
And then after that, he can go back and do it more.
Yeah, exactly.
That seems how it works.
I mean, I would love to see him do something real goofy at DC, just like, like a Green Arrow movie. Or like,
I like that. Yeah, I would say don't touch my Batman.
Yeah.
I'm very touchy with my Batman. Keep it dark. Don't make it too goofy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But like, there's plenty of other DC properties that could be picked up, and it's like, why not?
I'd want him to pick up one where I'm like, who?
Oh man. I mean, because those actually do play well. Like I felt like the same thing. I
No
guess
one knows Guardians or new Guardians.
I kept going. Yeah, Guardians. Like nobody knew who they were. I mean, I'm kind of hoping Eternals has the same thing. We'll see what happens with that one. It's been a little up and down in the early rumors.
Well, I feel both like Shang-Chi and Eternals were very in the universe yet out of the universe, and I don't see him going back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'd be very surprised.
Yeah.
But like I said, I mean, honestly, I think a person of color should direct this, but I think he'd be really good with a Miles Morales movie.
That would be fun, actually. But I also agree. I think you should put that in the hands of somebody who knows that, viewpoint in life. Mm-hmm. And it's going to resonate more. But that's also Sony's call, technically, isn't it?
Yeah, but I'm saying I kind of would like him to go in the Sony pool versus the, I'd rather him make Venom 3 than, make Winter Soldier 4 or whatever.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I'll put it on the line here right now. I think Miles Morales, in some shape or form, is showing up in this new Spider-Man. There's just too much potential.
Well, his Childish Gambino is his uncle in the movies, right? Yep. I just wonder if they're ever gonna do anything with that.
Well, I thought it'd be fun. Like, why don't you do the best thing I ever heard? Even it was a while ago with Spider-Man. Totally off the rails here, but. Is having somebody like Giancarlo Esposito be like an old Miles Morales. And I was like, that would be freaking dope. Like, he's kind of the Peter in Into the Spider-Verse, and he's kind of teaching Tom Holland how to be like, here's how you be Spider-Man. I mean, obviously we're expecting Tobey's going to show up and be that guy, but still, it's like, wouldn't that be something to be like Miles is the seasoned veteran who knows the thing, and here's an older version, but even Donald Glover could potentially be that guy too.
Was he supposed to be the guy who's Night Prowler?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the Prowler.
Because I think he could do a kind of interesting villain with his persona now. Because he's not the intense guy anymore. He's very much the laid back kind of dark secret guy. And I was like, I kind of like a villain who's kind of chill like that. But then the next moment they're like, the other person's dead.
Yeah, he's not Donald Glover of Community. He's Donald Glover of Atlanta now, right? That show is great. I think that something like that would be great. I was even thinking, Tarantino's boasted he has this Star Trek script. Put that in Edgar Wright's hands. Who else could do something good with it?
I would love them to a Tarantino script and then a directed Edgar Wright movie.
That's like holding candy, but I think the problem was Edgar Wright would be too tempted to mess with it and be like, oh, we just got to tweak this and that. I've never seen this movie. I don't know what that is.
True. I had an idea that he would never do, would have no interest in doing, is especially after if you look at Scott Pilgrim, I want to give him a 3-picture deal for the Mario trilogy.
Oh my god!
And I want it to be Mario Kart, Super Smash Brothers.
Oh,
and it's so it's not even technically a Mario; it's a weird Nintendo and. I just feel like he has no interest in doing this. He's probably not even the right age for it anymore. You want someone who's our age who's in the business to make this.
Yeah.
But just imagine that Scott Pilgrim aesthetic for a Mario movie.
It would be actually very fun to see that. Now, would it still be Chris Pratt, though, as Mario?
No, it would definitely not. I want him to pick someone like Bob Hoskins, who's oh, this is perfect. It shouldn't be.
It honestly, It's interesting that they went with Pratt. I know why they did it. I get why they did it. But it's also because they were oh, we're going to grab Ben Schwartz to be Sonic, which was inspired because Ben Schwartz can do that kind of high energy.
He also already kind of sounds like Urkel. He has that voice.
It fits because I remember originally too being Ben Schwartz. I'm just that's John Ralphio. And then you listen to him do Sonic and you're it plays. It definitely plays. And you're just and it's also nice that it's not somebody like a Ryan Reynolds where he brings that Pikachu, he's basically his personality in Pikachu's body, right? Instead, it's no, Ben Schwartz is Sonic. And now I feel we're going to get more, though, of here's Chris Pratt doing Chris Pratt things in Mario. I don't know. It's weird that Charlie Day is Luigi, too.
Because I always pictured Luigi, because Luigi doesn't have a lot of character development in the games, TV shows, but I picture him as a chill dude. I picture Mario oh man, I gotta go save the peach. I gotta go do this, and Luigi just when do we start? Like, I feel like that's Luigi style. Like, what do you need, brother?
Mario, let me tell you something, huh? You're eating mushrooms. It's getting out of control here.
I want it to be like in the town where Ben Affleck walks into Hawkeye's like house. He's like, I want you to come do some things with me. I can't tell you where we're going. And he's like, whose car we taking? I want it to be like that.
God, Renner would have been an interesting pick for that too.
Renner would be a great Luigi.
Jeremy Renner is Luigi. Mm-hmm. I'm here for it. I want all that. That's a good pick.
Yeah. I'm sorry, jump in. I was gonna say I had part of my coulda, woulda, shouldas, the idea of a fourth cornetto.
Oh, what theme would you do?
I had two things, and they're not even that. I'm not in love with them, so I'm kind of like, maybe he shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
But I kind of want like a Christmas movie. Like, I would love a holiday movie. I think he could do something with that, and I really like. I think he could do kind of like something that's got like a genre thing to it, like a horror Christmas movie. I don't know if you ever seen Rare Exports.
No.
That's like a movie that kind of balances that pretty well, or even Krampus, which is like that kind of, it's very much a Joe Dante style movie, like Gremlins. I'd love something like in the vein of Gremlins, and that was on his list of movies. Or I just put Medieval, which I was kind of picturing that Danny McBride movie that's not very good, Your Highness.
Oh.
But him doing it, but Edgar Wright doing it. Kind of like Slackers in the Medieval, but...
Yeah.
Then again, you can't really cast Simon Pegg and Nick Frost as like slacker dudes anymore. They kind of have to have more of a grown-up role, I think.
A little bit, yeah. But also I feel like if he's going to add any kind of like darker elements, or like maybe even like if for some reason my brain's going to like Christmas horror, like Black Christmas, or Christmas or horror medieval, which is like Army of Darkness. It's like, well, then you're basically just doing a rehash, which maybe he could do a pretty good turn on it, but I don't know. I think those definitely would be fun to see. I was even thinking just doing like, if he was going to do something more horror themed for another movie, he could do like another like haunted house, which would kind of be fun, or maybe just a straight up slasher, kind of take Hot Fuzz to like the next step of like, what if like Simon Pegg and Nick Frost were like detectives, not the same guys from Hot Fuzz, but just totally different. Where
what if like I would love a slasher at a Harry Potter-esque school, like an English prep school, but like kind of do it where it's like, this isn't Hogwarts, but y'all know this is Hogwarts.
I do kind of love that too, though, because I think it does have something that's like, it's that tongue-in-cheek of like, here's a fantasy world, but yeah, there's just straight up like just some dude murdering people. That is a thing, isn't it? Like, isn't there like a fantasy story where they are like investigating? Like, I feel like, you know what it is? I'm thinking of, did you ever play Wolf Among Us? It's a Telltale game, though, so the Wolf Among Us is based on, it's like fairy tale creatures, but they're like, what if they like live in like...
Yeah, they're world? Like in normal, like they're in Brooklyn or something.
Oh,
right?
It's killing me.
It's like a noir.
Yeah, I read the whole thing, too, and I'm like, I can't think of what it's called anymore.
But I love something like that for sure. And before I'd be like, well, they've got their 3 movies, but ever since Toy Story 4, I feel that's what I shove in everyone's face.
Yeah.
You know?
Fables is the name of the book that I was thinking of. Yeah, I know. And Toy Story 4, I'm still mixed on.
I like it better than 3.
What? Oh. We're talking about this another day.
The Toy Story episode.
Yeah. But I guess where I was trying to get to, even with the trilogies, too, because I was going to ask you about, you know, what are some of your favorites? But I kind of think the question I want to know here, do you prefer kind of the threaded story of a trilogy, or do you kind of like that more anthology feel? And I kind of think about like Indiana Jones like as like an anthology where it's like, yes, it's the same movie, it's the same character, but he's doing totally different things in each one.
You're picking up at different times potentially.
Yep.
With the second one being a prequel. I had like the lame answer of, well, it all depends. And the reason is because, yeah, like trilogies like Lord of the Rings, to some extent Planet of the Apes, although I don't love the last movie, I feel is relatively tight storytelling. Mm-hmm. But I also feel we look at like the most recent trilogy of Star Wars, where it's like they're trying to thread it, but they have the missing pieces, so it doesn't really come as one. But I do think there's merits to having the kind of Indiana Jones style dropping in thing. The only thing that you lose with that, you get the blank slate of kind of starting over with a familiar character. But what you lose is kind of that pathos. And the big example, and I was going to ask you before we start recording, I'm going to ask you on air.
All right.
Can I spoil No Time to Die?
I've watched it.
I know you have, but
okay. Well, we'll give spoiler warnings here. If you have not seen the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die, please hit fast forward on your recording right now. You may proceed.
We are in spoiler territory.
Spoiler territory.
That I know that's not a trilogy, but because I would describe James Bond when you have one actor, it's very much like Indiana Jones. We're like, oh, we're finding him here.
Yep.
When at the end of that movie, when they try to sell me a death of Indiana Jones, of James Bond, when he dies, I didn't really feel much.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big kind of split for me between having something that kind of picks up randomly, having a new story, versus having a threaded story where you can have those big moments. You can have, I'm sorry for not using another, no, I'll use a trilogy. Lord of the Rings, I mean, like, just the build up of that. Him putting the dang ring in the fire, like, is built up to that. I felt in, like, No Time to Die, they all of a sudden decided to do that, and it didn't work for me. So that's why I say, it depends.
Yeah, I kind of feel that, because I did feel that, too, that moment, too, because I was still sad. It's like, oh, they're going to do this. But I think what also hurt it for me, you know, because I'm an avid reader online or whatever, is I read, like, oh, then the title credits or in the end credits, they put James Bond will return. And I go, well, how does that work? Like, you just made a statement that this is it for this character, but yet you want to bring back James Bond, unless they're going to validate the whole theory of, like, he's a different guy with the same code name of James Bond 007. Like, I don't know.
Which they murkied that up a little bit with the 007 thing with the other agent. So
I hear you, though. I guess there's something to... Because, I mean, I guess in the accurate form, right, a trilogy should be telling one story, right? So it's like, I think maybe even the question's a little loaded. But I think at the end of the day, too, it's like, okay, we accept a trilogy as just a 3-movie or 3-story deal that all are somehow loosely connected by one kind of mainstream fact. It's just like our franchise podcast here, right? It's a franchise in the loosest sense of the term. Because is this really even a franchise? Maybe not, but he made it so by calling it a trilogy. So.
Yeah. Well, the water also gets a little murkied up because we live in a world where everything's getting sequelized and reboots, so our trilogies aren't trilogies anymore. Well, like, Toy Story was going to be one that I was going to put, and I'm like, that's a great trilogy. Then I was like, well, no, there's that fourth one. It's a quadrilogy. Or, like, Aliens, you know? Like,
yeah.
I think the original Alien 3, like, or 1, 2, and 3 are a nice, tight trilogy, but then you could think of, like, the other section as a trilogy or the next, you know, so.
Well, it's like, yeah, it keeps, I think that's the one thing, too, I was even going to get to, is our trilogy's dying because we're going to get, I mean, arguably one of the best 3-movie runs that is not going to end with that. Number 3 is John Wick. I was like, this is an excellent trilogy that they're like, we're playing with house money, we're going for number 4. And I'm like, do it though. Like, I would love to see that because it's already ramping up for another story. Like, it's just becoming Fast and Furious where everything's going to be a 5 to 10 movie deal. I think Marvel kind of broke that model a little bit by telling people, like, you ain't got to stop at 3 or 2 or whatever. So,
well, then I feel another kind of downside of the trilogy. It's not a downside of the trilogy. It's just how it can be kind of used. Is people don't necessarily put the effort into the individual pieces versus the whole. We saw that very recently with the Halloween kills. Yeah. I have a feeling the third one's going to be better than the second one.
It has to
I don't know if it's going to, I don't know if it's going to be much better, but I have a feeling they had like a good idea for what they wanted out of a trilogy, and they were like, well, we need a middle movie where this is going to happen. So I love the idea of 3 movies that tell one story and they're all individually satisfying, but I think that's just a really hard needle to thread.
It is. Well, and think about it too in terms of like how a lot of TV series are structured now, right? You typically have, I think it's becoming a more popular model. I'm thinking of like back to Watchmen. There was a 8-episode miniseries that was 45-hour episodes each. So you calculate that out. That's almost 8 hours, right? 3 movies could be about, 7.5 hours if they're each 2.5 hours each. Like probably with this Halloween trilogy that we're going to be getting here. And it's very much just like the format is that we want to tell an 8-hour story now. Or, like a 7 to 8 hour story that's going to require multiple installments in order to give you the proper tools to get, which, I mean, I'm on board for because I feel like we're getting better stories by giving more time to do character building and world building. But then you have stuff like Halloween Kills where I'm like, what did we learn? We have the little boy from the first one who just turns into big angry Anthony. Like, oh, man.
He's got real anti-vaxxer energy in it, too.
Serious. Is he an anti-vaxxer?
No, I don't think he... But, so Anthony Michael Hall seems like one of those, like, dudes. Like, I heard an interview with him on the Kingcast. And, like, he was talking about, like, actors, like, who are, like, in the media. And he was like, well, we know Johnny Depp is going through his trials and tribulations. And the way he said it was like,
It's like, that could easily be me at any point.
That was the vibe I got from him. An actor who I think he's got a real intense presence now, which is the most hilarious thing to me. Yeah. Because he's really good in The Dark Knight for that one scene.
Yeah, that one scene. It is really interesting how he plays like bit parts. We're totally off the rails on this, but
I love it.
I still want to talk about it because it is. I think when you do think about, I think that even the Dark Knight trilogy itself, it's still a one-threaded story that is picking it up at multiple points in his career as Batman, and that's what I loved about it.
I'm surprised we didn't say Dark Knight. I would put that as a very successful trilogy because people hate on the third one. I think the third one's pretty good. I have no problems with it.
I think, again, it's just like the Cornetto trilogy. It is probably my least favorite of the 3, but I still liked it. Like, it's all good. So it's just, you got to pick one or the other. And it's so hard to stick the landing. Again, we'll see how John Wick does it, even with the 4th one. Matrix is going to be added.
And a Mel Gibson-led TV series.
Oh, what a miss. What an absolute miss.
They have the guy from The Wire. Isn't he the head of the Continental? Lance something, not Hendrickson, but he's got a name very similar to Lance Hendrickson.
Yeah, no, I know who you're talking about. I can't think of his name right now. But yeah, it's rough. But no, I think that's a great one too. Dark Knight I think that's probably the best balance of what we're talking about, of like, it's a threaded story of one character, but it's not like Back to the Future where it's like Doc shows up at the end, picks up Marty. We're going to the future here. Okay, now we got to go back way to the past, and now you got to pick my ass up. And it's just like, and I think somehow that trilogy's aged better because it did commit to the fact that it's like, we are going to do one straight-on story rather than pick up Marty from, I don't know, like 10 years later and be like, okay, hey, you want to go time travel again? He's like, isn't this a problem? This was a problem, right? Like,
well, that's also the other issue with trilogies and movies that continue is having a main character in your film, having a successful arc in the first film, and then you're looking at your options on how to continue, and a lot of the times they're like, well, let's just destroy that arc. And, like, no, a character can continue to evolve. I think as humans, we continue to evolve, hopefully. And I feel like that's kind of the thing in the second Back to the Future. It's like, okay, in the first one, I know it's a little weird because he gets, like, a nice car at the end, and that's kind of a weird message. But I think the thing that's weird is he has to be selfish for the plot to continue.
Yep.
And I don't think he's that character anymore. I think it works and it's fine. I love the second one. But I think that's a big issue with continuing movies is being true to the character's development. Iron Man 2 is the worst of that.
Yeah.
He's like an asshole again for no reason.
You know, that is actually a good thing I thought about too. Because I was trying to brainstorm some trilogies before we started talking about this. I was like, well, man, Marvel's going to kind of wreck the Captain America one. I mean, we have the Steve Rogers Captain America trilogy, and then it's going to hand off to, spoiler alert, Sam Wilson, which I'm excited for because that was probably my favorite part of Falcon and Winter Soldier was his arc. But, yeah, I mean, you look at the Iron Man, which is going to theoretically stop at the trilogy, like,
Yeah, I would say I hope
good.
it's like a Halloween Kill situation because I love 3. Mm-hmm. Like 3 might be my favorite of the Marvel movies.
I think it works better now after Shang-Chi. Like, now that they've kind of been like, here's the real Mandarin.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I get that. I guess because you were a comic book guy, right? Or or at least
yes.
a comic character person. I feel a lot of people were bummed, and like me not caring at all. I was like, "Oh, that's cool. You guys are just doing your own thing." And people who love comic books are like, "Don't do that."
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess the problem with that, not to get off on a whole other tangent, is that, I mean, for one, the Mandarin, obviously, it's as a reference to like Eastern Asia rather than the Middle East, which I thought was an interesting reimagining for this story, because it's like, oh, our greatest like struggle right now is in the Middle East, so we can tell a lot of interesting stories by doing a terrorist, who's from the Middle East. I felt like the problem with that movie is that Ben Kingsley was so good as like playing this terrorist that you're almost just like disappointed that it wasn't him. You're like, he seems like he's got his shit together. Like, he's menacing, like when he's playing that part.
Got that like kind of southern accent going.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
I forget his line, but you're just like, oh, listen about this.
Americans.
Yeah, that's it. That's the voice. I love it.
Yeah, which is so funny now when he comes out with the English accent, he just sounds like a lunk. Speaking of things that we like better than the other, we'll get into our power rankings this week, which I want to do 2 rankings, Fred. I want to do the Cornetto Trilogy itself, but then beyond the Cornetto Trilogy. Well, hey, let's do that. Let's start there. So, where would you rank these 3 movies?
Well, definitely, like we said before, Hot Fuzz is easily my number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Shaun of the Dead is easily my number 2, and World's End's my easily number 3, which, hey, we were talking about trilogies, sequels, much like Empire. The sequel is strong here.
Yeah, the second one is the best. So, here's where I'll add the twist, though. If you throw in Scott Pilgrim and Baby Driver, where do those slot into your rankings? So we're doing a top 5 here of just Edgar Wright's movies.
I think they might. I think it would be Scott Pilgrim above World's End and then Baby Driver at the back, driving up the rear.
Wow. That's interesting. So you would put Scott Pilgrim below Shaun of the Dead?
I would.
Okay. I think I would put it above Shaun of the Dead, but maybe below Hot Fuzz. That's maybe my one debate.
Your number 2?
And I say it because of this, is that I think it does so much, Scott Pilgrim that is, of like a very like teenage version of like what Hot Fuzz is doing. Like he's very much in like a certain mode right there where it's like he's kind of feeling himself a little bit there, where it just seems like, oh yeah, these 2 things feel good. I think he's got the cast that are really driving the story. There's a lot about kind of like, a person who's sort of disillusioned, kind of coming to and really stepping up. And I think it just kind of picks up off of what Shaun of the Dead did there too.
Very
like,
similar theme.
Yeah, like kind of like you have to, I don't know, it kind of does what Shaun of the Dead did, but maybe even a little bit better in my opinion. I don't know.
Well, that's how all your films should go, I feel like, if you're picking up the same themes.
I think I would put Baby Driver above The World's End, too.
See, well, here's the thing. I think I like World's End better, but I've been recently thinking I kind of want to rewatch Baby Driver because I saw it twice in theaters.
Oh, really?
I was not doing a lot at that time in my life. It wasn't like it was like the most amazing thing, but I was like, I could see that again.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen it since. I have not seen it since 2017, so we're talking like 5 years. So I feel I need to rewatch that one, but I still think I'd put World's End just because I think it runs off the nostalgia of the Cornetto of it all.
Yes. I think you're right. It does kind of feel like that, where it's like a heist movie of sorts. You know what? You're right. I think it's worth a rewatch to kind of evaluate it, but I think I'm going to stick with my rankings for now. Just because I feel like The World's End, I just feel like it's 2/3 of a movie that I really like, and then there's a third that I'm like, eh. But I like it all.
I know we should have covered this before. How do you feel about the very end of The World's End? Do you like that?
I actually did.
Me too.
I thought I didn't like it the first time. I'll be honest. I think it hit me the wrong note the first time because I think I was expecting a different movie, and then this time I was like, shit, this doesn't look too much different than what could happen right now. Like, it's like if I woke up tomorrow and I'd be like that, I was like, no work. All right. So I think that's definitely what feels good. But I mean, altogether, I think we're in agreement. Edgar Wright, I think his movies are great. I'm super stoked for Last Night in Soho because I think that's going to be. It seems like his more serious stroke, even above what Baby Driver did. I'm very curious how he's going to play with that.
I'm very excited to see Mayhem from Attack the Block.
Oh, that's right. He's in this too,
and he looks like just the same but taller.
Yeah.
Like I was like, you didn't grow out of your kid face. You're just bigger.
Oh,
yeah, I'm excited. You got Diana Rigg's last role.
That's right. She's in it too.
Terrence Stamp.
Man, it's really a great cast. Again, he just does so well with people who want to work with him. I think both the actresses he picked are just excellent. Like, there's very big up and coming. I mean, anybody who watched Queen's Gambit knows that Anya Taylor-Joy,
or just even The Witch, like where she's like that was way earlier in her career, and that's like that should have gotten some awards talk. I think her and The Witch is like quite pitch perfect.
Yeah. Oh, it's really was like the head turner, and then Split. I felt like I was like, yep, I'm keeping an eye out because she's gonna keep doing bigger things after this.
Did you see Thoroughbreds?
No, I did not.
You should check out Thoroughbreds because it's her and that other young actress who's really good. She was the actress in what's the movie where they do VR and it's Spielberg? Ready Player One.
Yeah,
that actress.
Oh, I know who she is. She was also in that Sound of Metal movie with.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she was pretty good in that too. Interesting.
But it's those two, and it's I'm just having brain farts, but you're here, so that's what's good. The young actor who died, who was in the new Star Trek movies.
Oh, yeah.
It's his last movie.
Anton Yelchin.
Anton Yelchin. The name I kept thinking was Patrick Fugit.
Oh, no, that's somebody
They
else.
had slightly similar vibes, but not the same.
No, it's a shame, but that's great. I think he's, like, again, you know, Edgar Wright's working with a lot of great people who are all linked into, like, these great projects. It's just night and day. Like, it seems like everybody who comes through there ends up doing something just huge. Like, I mean, you know, from Hot Fuzz to Scott Pilgrim to everything else. I mean, I highly recommend anybody who's not seen all parts of the Cornetto trilogy, seek it out. Nothing's too scary for you. It's perfectly palatable. Yeah, so I think it's great.
If you watch Baby Driver, just imagine it's Christopher Plummer.
That's your way out of getting around the Kevin Spacey of it all. Yeah, and I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. Stay tuned for next week, though. We're going to dive into our first video game franchise. We're going to finalize the details on this.
That's the hint. Is it's video game related? We know. We just don't want to give it away yet.
Yeah, we're gonna hold this under our wire as we discuss some options. But no, as usual, it's a great talking to you, Fred. We'll hopefully get a chance to do more of this where we can just bounce some things back and forth. But we're excited to have some more guests coming up again soon too. So stay tuned for more of that, and we'll see you next week or next time.
See you later.
Thanks again for tuning into this week's State of the Franchise. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, please subscribe to our podcast so you can get the episodes as soon as they drop. And if you're really feeling generous today, please remember to rate and review us. It really does help get our name out there. We're available now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Stay tuned next time, too. We'll be talking about Crash Bandicoot. So if you were a PlayStation player from back in the day, we'll hit you with the nostalgia train. And if you never played it, maybe it'll be something you'll be able to seek out for yourself and enjoy for the first time ever. Thanks, and we'll see you then.